All right, so today we're diving into the world of a robot that, well, you would rather be binge-watching TV than, saving the universe,
Sounds familiar.
right? But the thing is, this robot, it's really good at the saving part.
We're talking about Murderbot, right? From Martha Wells's Murderbot Diaries.
You got it. And wow, you guys sent us a ton of stuff about this series. Articles, interviews, even some analysis of the German translation, which, by the way, is fascinating. We've got a lot to cover.
It really is amazing how much there is to unpack about this series that's on the surface about a robot who just wants to be left alone with its streaming subscriptions. But your sources really get to the core of it all. What it means to be human.
Exactly. And isn't that something we're all trying to figure out? Like, what does it even mean to be human? But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Maybe we should back up a bit for anyone who hasn't met Murderbot yet.
Good point. So, picture this. A robot, part human, part machine, built for combat, that's secretly hacked its own programming. Why? So it can binge-watch space operas, of course. That's Murderbot, our reluctant hero, with a serious case of social anxiety.
It's kind of like the ultimate introvert fantasy, becoming a robot just to avoid those awkward social situations, am I right?
Mm-hmm.
But here's where things get really interesting. Murderbot tries so hard to distance itself from humanity, but it can't hide those incredibly human qualities.
And that's what makes this series so captivating, right? That constant tension. Murderbot's desire for solitude, its fear of being controlled, its need for escapism, that's all deeply human. You can't deny that.
Totally.
Mm.
It's almost like looking in a mirror. If that mirror was a sarcastic robot who also happens to be really good at taking down bad guys. And that actually brings us to another point that your sources highlight.
Mm-hmm.
This blurred line between science fiction and, well, reality. Especially when it comes to corporate greed and, the consequences.
Yeah, it's chilling how much the Murderbot Diaries feels like, well, it could be our future. And it's not like Wells is pulling these ideas out of thin air. She straight up admits in that YouTube interview that she gets inspiration from watching the news.
It makes you wonder, are we that far off from a future where corporations, these mega corporations, they have more power than governments?
And the way Wells portrays Grey Chris, this huge corporation in the series, it's scary how much it resonates.
Totally. They're willing to exploit entire planets, all for profit, no second thought. It makes you think, like, have you ever felt stuck in a system that prioritizes profit over people? Even in small ways.
That's a question Wells really forces us to confront, and it's a good one. And in the Murderbot Diaries, those lines, right and wrong, they aren't always so clear.
It's a morally complex world for sure. And Murderbot, as much as it tries to stay neutral, it always gets pulled into those ethical dilemmas.
Which brings us to that fundamental question. What does it mean to be human? Murderbot might be a robot, right? But its actions, the way it starts to show empathy, even its sarcastic humor, it makes us really examine our own definition of humanity.
It's like the more Murderbot rejects its human side, the more human it actually becomes.
Yeah.
And, the more we see ourselves in this, let's face it, grumpy, kind of antisocial robot. And speaking of relationships, I was struck by how much your sources focused on the relationships between Murderbot and the other characters, both human and AI.
Yeah.
Those dynamics are fascinating.
Right. It's not your typical hero sidekick thing, is it? Take Dr. Mensa, for example. She's obviously brilliant, but she treats Murderbot with a level of respect, a level of autonomy that most humans in this world wouldn't even consider.
And it's not just Dr. Mensa, right? There's RT.
The asshole research transport.
Exactly. At first, they're kind of at odds, but then, wow, they form this bond that's, well, it's pretty unique.
It makes you rethink the whole idea of friendship, family even. I mean, they bicker constantly.
They tease each other.
They even team up to create, get this, sentient killware.
Which, yeah, sounds a bit intense, but underneath it all, you see this deep loyalty, real affection even.
And then there's Miki, the comfort unit, proves that even the smallest, most innocent AI, they can be incredibly brave.
So much compassion, too.
And that's what's so brilliant about Wells's writing. She creates this world with all these different AI personalities, each one making us question what it means to be sentient. Like, if a robot can feel such complex emotions, where does that leave us? What does that say about human empathy?
It really makes you think, are we defining connection too narrowly? I mean, can we truly understand another being, even if their experiences, their capabilities are totally different from ours?
Those are questions Wells wants us to ask. And remember, all of this, it's happening against this backdrop of a suspenseful, action-packed plot. It's incredible how she blends those thrilling parts with these deeper reflections on humanity and technology and, well, the future.
It's true. 1 minute Murderbot is hacking corporate systems, dodging lasers, battling other rogue sick units. And the next, it's dissecting the latest episode of its favorite space opera.
Or trying to avoid talking to people.
Exactly. That mix of action and introspection is what makes her such a fantastic storyteller.
And speaking of space operas, it's really interesting how Wells uses Murderbot's obsession with them. It's funny, but it's also a way for her to explore storytelling itself. This robot, built for combat, finds comfort, even guidance, in these cheesy, melodramatic TV shows.
It's hilarious. And a little profound when you think about it. Even a robot designed to be a weapon,
Yeah.
can find a connection through a good story.
It speaks to how much we crave stories, right? It's a human need. We want to escape. We want to feel connected to something, even if it is fictional. And Wells, she nails those details about Murderbot that make it feel so real. Its favorite snacks, the way it hates small talk. I mean, who doesn't?
Oh, and the love of fluffy blankets. It's those details that make you forget you're reading about a killing machine. It's endearing.
Because underneath that gruff exterior, there's this, well, maybe not a heart, but you know what I mean, this sense of justice, this drive to protect innocent people.
It's that internal conflict that makes Murderbot so interesting. 1 minute, it's like, I'm a killing machine, I don't have feelings. And the next, it's having a total panic attack because someone it cares about is in danger.
And it's those vulnerable moments that resonate, right?
Yeah.
We've all felt that disconnect between what we think we should feel and what we actually feel.
Absolutely. We've all been there, those moments of anxiety, fear, that pressure to fit in when you don't. It's like Wells is saying, hey, being human, it's not about being perfect.
It's about embracing the messiness, the contradictions.
And finding connection, even when it's hard. And you know what else I found interesting? The way Wells explores how language shapes how we see the world, especially in the German translation.
Right. Tagebuch eins Killerbots. Even the title, it highlights how one word choice can change how we view a character. Killerbot versus Murderbot. It changes things.
It makes you realize that translation isn't just about, swapping words. It's deeper than that. Nuance, cultural context, all of that factors in.
And it reminds us to be mindful of the language we use, especially with complex topics like gender identity.
Absolutely. It's not just about gender either. This series tackles corporate power, AI ethics, conscience. It's a lot. But she makes it so engaging.
And entertaining. Let's not forget that. And speaking of entertaining, that YouTube interview with Martha Wells, so good.
She's so down to earth, you can tell she loves what she does, but she's also real about the challenges.
That's refreshing.
For sure. Especially for aspiring writers. It's easy to think that, successful authors, they don't have those moments of doubt.
Oh, they definitely do. And while she talks about struggling with system collapse, even putting it aside for a while to work on something else.
Exactly. It's not always like this straight line from inspiration to finished book. Sometimes it's messy.
Totally. And she shows us that it's okay.
And that's something else I love about the Murderbot Diaries. The whole hero's journey. It's not what you'd expect.
Because Murderbot is the most reluctant hero ever.
Right. Seriously. Would rather be anywhere else than in the spotlight.
Give this robot a comfy couch and some space opera, it's happy.
Exactly. But it always rises to the occasion. Even if it is with a sarcastic comment. Or 10.
And I love that grumpy heroism.
It's what makes us root for Murderbot.
Yeah, 100%. It's like, it's okay to have flaws, to be scared, to put yourself first sometimes, even when you're saving the world.
It's funny because we were talking about what it means to be human, and there's this line in that NPR article they called Murderbot one of sci-fi's most human characters. Kind of ironic, isn't it?
Totally. A robot trying so hard not to be human.
And yet, it embodies it perfectly. Craves independence, fears being controlled, seeks connection, even though it's, awkward. Finds comfort in cheesy TV shows.
It's all so human.
It really is. And those moments where Murderbot lets its guard down, that's when we connect with it the most. Like those vulnerabilities, they're universal.
Because they remind us that it's okay not to have it all figured out.
Exactly. And the Murderbot Diaries, it's not just about Murderbot as an individual, right? Well, it shows us these really different relationships.
Which, in a way, challenges our own ideas about relationships, right?
Totally. I mean, Murderbot and Dr. Mensa, their friendship.
Yeah.
And then there's Art, that hilarious dynamic. And even Miki, you see Murderbot's protective instincts kicking in.
It's like Wells is saying, what if we could just, see past those surface differences, appreciate what makes each person unique?
And not just people, other AIs too. That's a powerful message.
It really is.
But ultimately, I think that's what makes this series so hopeful, right?
Even in this future where, things are a little uncertain, technology is changing everything, there's still that human capacity for empathy, for love, for a good story. Those things matter.
They do. So, as we wrap up our deep dive into the world of Murderbot, I guess the question is, what will you take away from it? What does it mean to be human, to connect with others in a world that's constantly changing?
Big questions. And the Murderbot Diaries, it reminds us that it's okay to keep asking them, to keep exploring.
And hey, maybe even be a little bit braver, just like a certain grumpy, introverted security robot we all know.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
So, to our listeners, we hope you enjoyed this deep dive, and we'll see you next time for another adventure in storytelling.